One night, 1865, 5 days after the Civil War ended in Washington, D.C., two men named John Wilkes Booth and Silas Wilkinson suddenly came to Thomas Gates, an expert at solving puzzles. Booth asked Thomas to translate the code recorded in his diary where the clue read the debt that all man pays. A few moments later, Silas reminded Booth to complete his main goal, while he would wait for Thomas to finish decoding the clue. Booth followed Silas's suggestion and then went to the Ford Theater building because it turned out he was planning to kill President Abraham Lincoln. The news of the shooting immediately shocked everyone, including Thomas, who finally realized that the man in front of him was a group of traitors. At the same time, he also knew that the puzzle in the diary he was trying to solve was a treasure map, and so that the treasure wouldn't fall to the wrong person, he tore up the note and intended to burn it. Unfortunately, Silas found out. He immediately took the remaining paper and finished off Thomas Gates. Many years have passed, but Gates' grandchildren and great-grandchildren still remembered the incident and kept talking about it. Gates' great-grandson, Ben Gates, spread the story so that Thomas Gates could be remembered as a hero because he succeeded in stopping the traitors and getting clues about the treasure. But someone suddenly opposed Ben's story and accused it of being a fake story by saying that Thomas Gates actually invited Booth and Silas to plan Abraham Lincoln's assassination because he had evidence regarding the incident in the form of the remaining sheets of Booth's diary that were not burned. Ben was shocked to hear that. He immediately asked the man, Mitch Wilkinson, who turned out to be Silas Wilkinson's great-grandson, to examine the historical item, and when the museum checked it, it turned out that the piece matched, but they still wanted to check more carefully whether the item was genuine or not. After that meeting, Ben and his father, Patrick, couldn't stop thinking, especially Patrick, who remembered the details of the story. Unfortunately, Mitch had the proof, and it was of course much stronger than the story passed down from generation to generation by the Gates family. This conspiracy could certainly tarnish the good name of the Gates family. Therefore, Ben vowed to prove that the notes in the journal were indeed a treasure map. Without wasting more time, Ben immediately met his friend, Riley, an author of a history book containing theories about American historical conspiracies. Unfortunately, his life was not going well. The book was not selling in the market. Even the Ferrari car that he was always proud of was confiscated by the government because he was deemed unable to pay taxes. Ben asked for Riley's help to open the passcode to his house door because since he broke up with his girlfriend, Abigail, she took the house and changed the passcode. Ben's goal in returning to the house was to take Abigail's employee card, who was the director of document preservation. He wanted to use it to break into Abigail's office and check Booth's diary, but before Ben left the house, Abigail returned and caught him red-handed. Cornered, Ben finally told her about his problem and asked her to examine the historical item, and with a heavy heart, Abigail finally complied with Ben's request because he had promised to give her his antique. The examination did not bring any results at first, but when Abigail examined it more carefully, on the back of the paper, it was clear that there were clues stored in it. She then reminded Ben that the next day her fellow museum employees would definitely announce the discovery of this historical object, and that Ben's great-grandfather would be considered involved in the assassination of President Lincoln. Abigail's fears were proven when Mitch announced the discovery to the media that Thomas Gates was the mastermind behind the death of President Lincoln. This theory was proven by Booth's diary sheet, which was kept by the Wilkinson family. This news was later heard by the FBI, but Peter Sadusky, who was friends with Ben, couldn't believe it. He felt something strange going on and suspected Mitch had ulterior motives, but before concluding anything, Peter ordered his men to check Mitch Wilkinson's background. A few days later, the FBI discovered the fact that Mitch was a hired soldier and antiques dealer. This made Peter even more curious as he wanted to know why Mitch had given this historical item to the museum instead of selling it to an antique collector, which of course would be very expensive. Peter was convinced that Mitch wanted something more valuable than this and probably not money. Meanwhile, Ben had found hidden clues in the diary and asked Riley to translate it using a special application. Riley didn't find anything because there were too few clues, but after Ben and his father discussed it, they finally found the meaning of this clue, which read "La Belle Lady," a French person who created the Statue of Liberty. They also found out that there were 3 statues of liberty in the world, but the one mentioned by Laboulaye was the Statue of Liberty in Paris. The next day, Ben and Riley immediately flew to Paris. Riley used a small remote-controlled helicopter, which had a camera to look for clues at the Statue of Liberty, but their activity was caught by the police who were patrolling, so they were both almost expelled. Luckily, when Ben distracted the police, Riley found a note on the Statue of Liberty and Ben asked the police to translate it. From this note, Ben found a clue that led them to Queen Victoria, the Queen of England. Ben immediately realized that the clue in question was a Resolute desk made only 2 in the world, and one of them was at Buckingham Palace, so without wasting any more time, Ben and Riley immediately went to England. Meanwhile, Ben's father got an unexpected attack which turned out to come from Mitch and his men. Apparently, Mitch wanted to clone Ben's father's cell phone so that whatever clues Ben reported to his father, Mitch would find out. Finally, Ben and Riley went to England. The two of them share the task of sneaking into the Queen's office and finding out about the clues on the Resolute desk. Riley was in charge of tapping the CCTV and monitoring Ben's movements, while in the palace Ben would carry out his duties. When Ben was carrying out his mission, Abigail showed up. It turned out that Abigail intended to help Ben complete his mission, but instead of thanking her, Ben instead made a scene, causing people to pay attention to them. Abigail was confused because Ben suddenly became emotional until he realized that Ben was just acting, so the woman ended up following Ben's acting and they were arrested by officers. After that, they were taken to a room and asked to wait to be examined. At this time, they finally made up and left together to find the Queen's office. The two quietly went through a very narrow dumbwaiter to get out of there. After searching for the office while guided by Riley from outside, Ben and Abigail managed to find it. Ben immediately looked for clues on the Resolute desk, which turned out to have a secret code on it. When Ben managed to solve the puzzle, he got a wooden plank with various symbols and was sure that they were a clue to something. Ben immediately took the plank, but at the same time the security officers realized that Ben and Abigail had run away. They immediately looked for them. Luckily, Riley acted quickly. He triggered the false alarm to distract the officers' concentration so they could all escape, leaving the palace safely. As soon as they left the palace, Ben, Abigail, and Riley thought about how to translate the symbols on the wooden plank, but a few moments later, Ben realized that they were being followed by Mitch and his men, so he immediately took his friends to run away. Seeing them run away, Mitch immediately ordered his underlings to chase them. Amid the chase, Ben took a photo of his wooden plank using the speed camera since his cell phone camera had been damaged, and after that, he immediately threw the plank into the river so that Mitch's underlings would stop chasing them. After that, Ben went back to his father's house to translate the clue. Unfortunately, Patrick admitted that he couldn't translate it, but he knew who was an expert in the field. This was none other than Emily, Ben's mother. He then invited his father to meet his ex-wife, although initially his father refused because he had not communicated with her for more than 30 years. He finally complied with his only son's request. The next day, they met Emily, who was a lecturer at the University of Maryland. Initially, Emily seemed to hate seeing Patrick, but after Ben intervened and immediately stated his purpose for coming to visit his mother, Emily happily helped Ben to solve the clue. Unfortunately, the plank they had didn't have complete instructions because basically the Resolute desk was built in pairs, so Ben had to look for the other desk, the Hayes desk, which was located in the White House. Without wasting any more time, Ben and Abigail went straight to the White House, which was holding an Easter event. Abigail met Connor, the man who liked her and worked in the White House. He was initially reluctant, but Ben immediately stated their purpose and pretended that Abigail wanted to visit the president's office. Connor was reluctant, but because this was a request from Abigail, the woman he loved, he complied. Connor asked Abigail and Ben to be careful because the president's office was not a public place that anyone could visit. But then, when Ben found the Hayes desk, he signaled Abigail to act so that Ben could find the next clue from the table. Abigail pretended to drop her earring and asked Connor to look for it. Meanwhile, Ben immediately moved quickly to find a clue on the desk. Unfortunately, when the table code was solved, the plank with the clue was no longer there. A few moments later, Ben and Abigail came out of the White House and immediately told Riley that the plank was no longer there. After hearing that, Riley remembered that he had written about the secret presidential book conspiracy no one knows the whereabouts of because it was passed down from one president to the next. But if a rumor was true, most likely the book also recorded something about the Hayes desk and the secret code. Unfortunately, only the president knew about the book. Ben realized that he didn't have any connections to meet the president, but then he got the idea to kidnap the president. He wanted to direct the president's birthday celebration that would be held soon to meet Vernon Hotel, because there was a secret tunnel there that could make his plans easier. The next day, Riley and Patrick worked together to book all the hotels in Washington, so the president's event, whether they wanted it or not, had to be held at the Meet Vernon Hotel, so Ben's plan could be carried out. That evening, Ben met the president, who apparently already knew him as a member of the Gates family. Ben knew that the president really liked George Washington, so he showed a map drawn by Washington, showing a secret tunnel that was not far from where they were. He successfully lured Mr. President to look for the tunnel. Ben and Mr. President then went to this tunnel under the guard of the Presidential Guard, but Mr. President, who didn't want to be disturbed, deliberately ordered his bodyguards to stay outside while he and Ben went through the tunnel. It became effortless for Ben to trap Mr. President and himself. Mr. President was shocked when he realized Ben's intention to trap him there, but Ben immediately asked about the rumors about the president's secret book. At first, Mr. President didn't want to confirm the conspiracy, but Ben looked serious. He had even prepared a way out for the two of them because he didn't really want to kidnap Mr. President. Finally, Mr. President told him where the book was, which was stored in the library. He also gave the book number, which was a secret code to find the book, and after getting this clue, Ben immediately left, but before that, Mr. President asked him to be careful because if the mission was not successful, he would not be able to defend Ben in public, and for that reason, Ben could be caught because had endangered the president's safety. Without wasting more time, Ben, Riley, and Abigail immediately met and headed for the library. Abigail, who already knew the place by heart, went straight to the bookshelf, which was set to hold the president's secret book. But when they found the place, it turned out that the book was nowhere to be found. Riley thought that the book was being borrowed, but Ben found a code behind the shelf, and when he input the code with the book number, the book appeared, which turned out to be not just a rumor. Ben immediately looked for the information about the Hayes desk and found a new clue. They had to immediately leave because the FBI started looking for him. Ben then told his two friends to leave and split. At first, Abigail was almost suspected, but she managed to get out of the library, and not long after, Ben was able to catch up so that the three of them were able to get out of the library safely. At the same time, Mitch immediately knew that Ben had managed to find a new clue. He acted quickly. Knowing that Emily could translate the code, he immediately met her. At first, Emily thought that Mitch was a treasure hunter, so she didn't want to help. But because Mitch threatened her, she was forced to comply with the man's request. Mitch also told her to lie about the clue from the plank. She eventually did it when Patrick came to her, even though she was sure that Ben would be able to find new clues because Ben was an intelligent man. The next day, Mitch took Emily to Mount Rushmore, the location which was thought to be the secret place for the treasure. Unexpectedly, Ben and his friends had arrived first. Mitch immediately alerted and he threatened Emily's safety, but Ben said that the police were currently chasing him, so it was possible that Mitch would definitely be arrested too. In the end, Mitch was forced to work together with Ben to look for the treasure. A few moments later, they arrived at a rocky area. Ben forced Mitch to say the next clue because he knew that Mitch had forced his mother to translate the clue on the wooden plank. Finally, Mitch revealed the clue, and somehow, Ben understood the clue. He immediately poured the rocks there with water, knowing that was the only way to find the next clue. Abigail managed to find the symbol of a bird which marked the entrance to the treasure. Ben put his hands into the rock, and after a bit of joke, a cliff nearby suddenly collapsed and revealed a hidden entrance. The group immediately entered, but when they entered, the entrance closed automatically, so they ended up trapped inside. Everyone tried to find the exit, but unfortunately, Ben, Riley, Abigail, and Mitch slipped down and were separated from Ben's parents. They fell on a trap-like contraption, and they had to stand on certain parts of the floor so that they wouldn't slip down. They looked for a way out until Abigail found the ladder nearby. Initially, Ben was the first person who wanted to climb the stairs. He arranged everyone there so that the floor remained balanced. However, Mitch was ahead of Ben, so Ben had to let him go first. Ben and his two friends waited for Mitch to help them, but because Mitch didn't come back, Abigail decided to be the second person to get out of there. Unfortunately, when Abigail tried to reach the ladder, the wooden floor collapsed. Riley jumped following Abigail while Ben was left on the floor. Fortunately, Mitch returned and managed to help Ben so that they were all saved. The four of them then found a large room which was a water reservoir, and when they searched it, it turned out that the next clue was under the water, so they had to make the water recede to continue their journey. After following the clue they found in the water reservoir, they finally managed to find what they were looking for: Sabola, the Olmec city made completely out of gold. At the same time, Ben's parents also managed to get there. With the discovery of this site, Thomas Gates, Ben's great-grandfather, was proven innocent. Mitch finally admitted his actions. He apologized for slandering Thomas Gates because that was the only way he could lure Ben to look for the treasure with him. Mitch had finally achieved his goal by registering Wilkinson's name as the discoverer of Sabola. Unfortunately, this happiness didn't last long because the place started leaking. They had to get out immediately or else they would be trapped there. Patrick realized that the water was flowing down and thought that was their exit, though when they wanted to get out, the stream got stronger and someone had to hold the door so they could get out safely. Ben sacrificed himself so that everyone could get out of that place, but bad luck happened to Mitch because a stone fell. He was forced to hold the door while Ben bounced towards the door. In the end, it was Mitch who sacrificed himself, but before he got out, Mitch ordered Ben to write down Wilkinson's name as the discoverer of Sabola. Finally, Ben, Riley, Abigail, and Ben's parents managed to get out of the cave. Ben was forced to tell the FBI that he had found the treasure, but he was arrested on charges of kidnapping the president. Ben was then brought before the president, but instead of being imprisoned, Mr. President testified as if Ben had saved him from the tunnel at the Mount Vernon Hotel. And because of that, Ben didn't end up in prison and instead got an award. Finally, Ben was able to clear the name of his great-grandfather, Thomas Gates. Abigail asked him to reconcile because she realized that the only person who could understand her was Ben. Riley, on the other hand, started to get the spotlight. He was happy because finally someone recognized him as a writer. Even the president had returned his Ferrari, awarded a free tax for his luxury car.